Hello and welcome, Exiles, to my charge stacking Cyclone Shockwave Slayer with a hint of Herald of Ice glory. This character is all about scaling a bunch of charges and then using those charges to give us AoE, crit, percent damage scaling, defenses, you name it, we get it all from charges. This character stemmed around the idea of wanting to make a new character around the new support gem Void Shockwave, which is essentially just a much stronger version of generic Shockwave support, and this pairs great with skills like Static Strike or Cyclone. I chose to do Cyclone because I like the spin to win feel of like pretty chill gameplay. Static Strike would work as well as we are using all this charge scaling to fulfill a fantasy that I wanted to succeed at, which was making Herald of Ice actually chain explode by its own merits. Now, initially, I had the idea of wanting to do this with a Frost Mage character, but that Frost Mage character, the scaling on it wasn't very good. I didn't have enough AoE scaling, I didn't have enough percent damage scaling, and the Herald of Ice simply could not chain off of itself. With this character, with the charge stacking, there's enough generic power, because you need to solve AoE, percent damage scaling, and crit, and it does all three of those, that my Herald of Ice can actually chain off mobs and create these awesome, magnificent explosions. Now, I'm featuring here quite a few different MTXs, just to give you guys an idea of what these MTXs look like. Of course, I don't have all the Herald MTXs, but I have bought a few over my years of playing this game, and so I'm featuring some of them just in this one map. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of the scaling and how we get to, for example, 15 of each charge, because you might be thinking, that's a crazy number, how are we getting there? It all starts with the baseline Ascendancy choice, which is Slayer for one Ascendancy point in particular, Masterful Form. Masterful Form says your maximum endurance is equal to your maximum frenzy. Then we take this one step further using the transitive property, basically, and we get a badge of the Brotherhood, which gives your maximum frenzy is equal to your maximum power. With these two things, the Ascendancy point and the amulet, if we stack maximum power, every single time we get a maximum power, we will get a maximum frenzy and a maximum endurance from it. So we can sole focus one specific charge type and get all three from our scaling. Now, how are we getting to 15 power charges? That's the big question. It comes from a few places. Number one is our weapon. It has +1 power charge on implicit and +1 power charge on the explicit. So we get 2 maximum power charges from our staff. Number two is our helmet has +1 power charge. That takes us to 3. Number 3, 4, number 4, 5, and 6 are our rings, which all have +1 power charge on them. So that takes us to 6 total maximum. Then we have our belt, which is giving the Resonating Shrine, which gives +1 max charge. That takes us to 7. And then if you scale Shrine Effect, you can get that to another +1 because we have 100% Shrine Effect between our goal and our Blunderbore. It should be noted, you can get to, if you get to 200% Shrine Effect, this would give you 3 maximum charges. This is not very feasible to do because outside of the maximum roll on the Blunderbore and the goal, you'd get 92-92. Number one, if you did that with Volatile Val Orbs, you'd be giving up your max power charge corruption because you can't get an implicit and a Volatile Val Orb outcome, so you'd lose a power charge on your helmet. And then other things like there's not really any sources of Shrine buff effect. Guardian has 10% on a small node. You could wear Ichimonjis. Those have 10% buff effect, 10% buff effect, but then you lose your weapon slot, which is giving you 2 max power charges. So getting 3 max charges from the belt is not super feasible. There's not really much synergy or reason to do so. And this guy wants to mirror our staff. Confirm. I'm going to cut this out. All right. Anyways, as I was saying, with our max charges, or with the max charge scaling from the Screamers of the Desiccated, you might think it's feasible to go for 3 maximum charges. I tried to look at this from multiple ways, and I couldn't see a world where I could make this give me 3 max charges without losing a max charge somewhere else, or giving up some important slots or some important opportunity cost in power. So anyways, as I was saying, we have about 8 maximum charges from the stuff on my character. Then from the tree, you get 3 max from the 3 notables on the tree. That takes you to 11 max power charges. The baseline is 3 power charges. That takes you to 14. And to top it all off, to get to number 15, we have a Sublime Vision. That's how we get to 15 max power charges. And what does this end up doing for the character? What kind of scaling does this give us? Well, the answer is it gives us a crap ton of scaling. 15 power charges to start off with is 750% increased crit chance. But on top of that, you get nodes like these, which give 8%. So you get another, I don't know, what, 120% crit chance or something from this. You get 5 crit multi. That's 75 crit multi right there. You get some mana regen. I'm not actually using, like, I have life tap and stuff, so I'm not using my mana pool at all except for being able to sustain my tincture. That's what it's doing for my character currently. So it gives you a bunch of crit chance, a bunch of crit multi, some mana regen, which helps with sustaining your tincture because we have all of our stuff on life tap. Then on top of that, obviously we have the scaling from frenzy charges, which 15 frenzy charges is 60% more damage, plus 60% increased attack speed, plus 60% cast speed. Then you have your endurance charges, which is giving 60% physical DR and 60% elemental DR, so it's a bunch of tank. And then outside of the normal stuff you're getting from your charges, you're getting these extra stats, like I showcased, the percent crit chance, the crit multi, but it doesn't stop there. You get a lot of percent damage. 8% damage per power charge, 120 damage there. I have a Caspero Elegant Hubris Jewel, 150% damage, 150, 150, 150, 600 here, plus that 8% is 720. Then you have both of these notables, which is 240 additionally, which takes us to like 960. We're getting almost 1,000% increased damage, just generic. That applies to everything, including our Herald of Ice from our charges. So it solves our percent damage, it solves our crit, it gives us a bunch of attack speed, it gives us a bunch of more damage, and it gives us DR, defenses. But it doesn't stop there. The benefits keep rolling. What's something else you get from a lot of charges? You get a hell of a lot of AoE. You might have noticed our Herald of Ice was pretty big. 3% AoE per power charge, 3% AoE per power charge, 3% AoE per endurance charge, Slayer AoE. Point is, we have almost over 200 to 250 AoE just from basically our power charges and our baseline ascendancy, which means when we spin to win, our Cyclone's big, our Shockwave's big, and our Herald of Ice is big. So when I'm talking about this generic scaling package where we solve crit chance, damage, AoE, the charges give you a numerous amount of things there. They don't stop there, though. The benefits keep going with things like power charge on crit. This support gem at level 1 gives 4% more damage per charge. It is one of the best use cases for an abuse support you can get. The same thing happens with endurance charge on melee stun. They both give 4% more per charge, which means these 15 charges from power, 60% more damage. And we have endurance charge on melee stun on our staff, 60% more damage from the endurance charges. So you have these layering multipliers, one on top of each other. And it doesn't stop there, because we have another thing, which you may be asking, Lance, where are you getting your flat damage from? Ice Bite support gives, and I have a +2 support staff, 21 to 31 flat cold damage per frenzy on top of the flat that's already on Ice Bite. And we have rings that have the horror mod, which says 4 to 8 flat damage per frenzy. So we get a boatload of more multipliers. We get a boatload of percent damage. We get a boatload of crit. We get AoE. We get attack speed. And we get flat. We have charges from max charges, which gives all the other charges. And then you get this whole host of offensive package that just works. And so that's kind of the baseline of this character and how it's all working together in terms of scaling. As for one thing that I wanted to solve with this character, I wanted to make Herald of Ice actually effectively chain explode. And we did this through A, this generic damage scaling, B, the new support Scornful Herald. With this Scornful Herald and the generic crit chance we have from power charges, we're instantly crit capped. We don't need to run any other crit support anywhere. And on top of that, Herald of Ice, if you look at the gem, you may notice its base radius is very small. It has a 1.2 base radius with the quality giving you 0.2 meters of radius, which makes it 1.4 base. That's pretty dang small. But in my effort to make the AoE of Herald of Ice an actual big, chunky AoE, I added in the enhanced support and eclipse support with a 23 quality that hits a breakpoint for 0.8 plus meter radius, because it's giving me another 6 point meter radius, which makes it much, much larger in terms of AoE. And that base radius then scales with all the increased AoE support we have from our tree, from our charges, all that stuff works together nicely. Now, one thing I want to note about this is I am planning to swap this to a 2020 Herald of Ice with power charge on crit, which is just 60% more damage. This will lose us the breakpoint for the 23 quality, getting us one of those 0.1 meters, but I think 60% more damage on the Herald of Ice will just make it more consistently a chain killing mobs, and I just don't have the reservation space for it. I do plan to try to go for, I want to go for one of the expensive Unnatural Instincts here to get the notables, to give us a bunch of, well, mainly I'm doing it for the block, but we will also get some reservation and AoE scaling there, which will make it so I can afford the Herald of Ice. Now, one thing I want to talk about additionally on this character is something I didn't really think was a reasonable thing to go for, which is block on a staff with no block implicit. And quite frankly, block on a staff as well, I was very skeptical of. And I gotta say, we found a way to do it, and it's blowing my mind a little bit that it was possible. And putting the block, and why are we doing block, is because we're trying to go for basically one of the most broken ascendancy points in the game, more than skill. Lucky block, if you've never played with it, you gotta try it out. It literally is just the enemies just don't hit you, is what it feels like. It's an insane tank multiplier. And there's a mastery that gives one of the most OP stats you can wish for, which is recover on block, and we can get that on a staff mastery. Normally, it's really hard to get block, so it's really hard to appreciate this mastery, but we are actually getting the block for this character. Right now, we're up to, we have 56 plus 53, and if I've stunned an enemy recently, which is basically permanently up while I'm mapping, I have another 8 block, which would take us to 64. But when I get the Unnatural Instinct here, we'll get another 8 block there, which will take us like 72 attack block, and 6 spell block here, which will be 14 spell blocks, which will take this closer to 67. And then if I've been hit recently, I have a Abyssal Jewel giving me another 4 block as well, which takes me to about 71 spell block as well. So we're having a staff build that is getting up to those numbers of block for 90 effective block with more than skill. And I'm just ecstatic that we were able to get to that. And how we're doing that is through the new Delirium Fog currency, where we roll around the cluster, specifically picking up nodes to force Prodigious on with Overlord, and a Prodigious gives 4 block. The way we had to do this is we had to roll for Overlord, re-roll to a Fizz cluster, imprint craft until we've had Furious Assault or any one of the Fizz notables. They all will appear in the back to make it so these are on our travel. And then roll it to a shield cluster, imprint craft for Prodigious defense, then roll it back to 2-hand or staff melee or cold damage, anything that gives us 12% damage. That's how this cluster was created. And that also gives us Fortify while we're mapping, which is really nice. And then we went for a double block cluster here as well. And then you'll notice we have block tattooed everywhere. Initially, when I was considering the idea of block, I was like, there's no way we're going to get the block, but we're actually doing it without really committing much block on our tree. We haven't grabbed a single, well, okay, that's not true. We grabbed 1 block cluster. We grabbed this staff block cluster, and it is one of the most efficient block clusters on the tree, but generally it's like, oh, we have no baseline block, so it still doesn't feel like it does too much, but it works out pretty well because this is like 17 of attack and spell block for 4 points, and the mastery gives 8 attack block. But anyways, it's, in my opinion, not all that bad in terms of passive point investment, and yet we were able to get some pretty solid block on our character, and it's working. Anyways, besides the point, but it's working. Now, I want to preface this by, this is some really heavy over investment into defenses. You may be looking at this character thinking right now, Lance, holy guacamole, I see this character and it looks like 4 mirrors of investment. That's because it is 4 mirrors of investment currently. I'm going to address the elephant in the room of, if you wanted to make this character much cheaper, I'm going to give you some suggestions on how to cut a ton of the cost out. So number 1 is the belt. I'm using right now a resistance resonating belt, which right now on trade they're listed for 2 or 3 mirrors. I bought mine for like 1,200 divines. Do you need this belt? The short and simple answer is no, you do not need this belt at all. You might think, but how did you cap res? Before I put this belt on, initially, I started out with the plan to use a massive shrine, but I ended up feeling like the AoE was a bit redundant, and it isn't super synergistic with Blunderbore, because Blunderbore is already giving you half the value of a massive shrine, and they don't stack together. So when I took off the massive shrine to put on the resistance shrine, I only lost half of the value of a massive shrine, if that makes sense. The thing about the resistance shrine is I was res capped before I put this on, and the way I did that was by having fire res tattoos instead of block tattoos, and having lightning res tattoos instead of crit reduction. What this means is you A, are dropping more than skill, and you're B, dropping resistance. These two things are massive defensive multipliers, but they do not make or break the character in terms of tank. You take these two things off, and you still have a character with 15 endurance charges and permanent fortify, Slayer Overleach, and Slayer DR, you're still going to be a fairly tanky character. This is just my obsession with making things extremely tanky. It is way overkill for vast majority of mapping content, and quite frankly, I think it's overkill even for you take this character to Ubers. It's not going to make or break whether or not you kill the Ubers. What's going to make or break you killing the Ubers is whether or not you do the fight correctly. Like if you just tank a bunch of mechanics all in a row type of thing. Anyways, so cutting out the belts, swapping the tattoos to res tattoos, and then another thing I would say is instead of going for like a perfect 5 mod staff with bench crafted +2, just focus on getting endurance charge on stun or power charge. Either one works. And if you do the Cyclone with endurance charge versus the Cyclone with power charge, either one works. They both give 60% more damage at level 1 or level 10. That doesn't particularly matter. And then you want to combine that one of those mods with a max power charge. And then if you could get like attack speed. If you have like those 3 mods, like a 3 mod staff, and then multi-mod, hits can't be evaded, plus 2 supports, that'll get you a pretty solid weapon, and it'll be substantially more easy to craft, if that makes sense. So cut the belt out, just get yourself something like a resonating, swap the staff for a 3 mod staff, and then the bulk of your cost at that point, if you take out the more than skill clusters and you don't try to go for like these double block clusters, you just get 1 cluster with Overlord on the travel, then what you're doing is your main cost is going for +1 power charge rings. I think if you're shopping on an ultra budget, you could look at things like the synth rings or even the Foulborn ring that gives a PAX power charge. If you do that, you need to make sure you have like Ralakesh or some other source of consistent like power charge generation. The big downside of doing this is you will lose the flat damage per cold frenzy. So my recommendation is if you say, okay, maybe I don't have multi-mirrors budget, but I have like 500, 600 div, invest it into a couple power charge rings. That's going to be your biggest bang for buck in terms of investment, in terms of if you have some money you want to put into making the character work for like 80% of the power or whatever. That's the sort of thing I would recommend. All right. Aside from all of that stuff, going over the budget things, I want to talk a bit about the boots and elusive because I forgot to go over it, and movement speed. Our character, when you put on this belt, you lose your ability to have Quicksilver, you lose your ability to have like Mage Blood movement speed, and you're wondering, how do you get movement speed in this build? I forgot to go over it when I was going over charges, but you get 2% movement speed per frenzy. That's 30% movement speed here. You get 2% movement speed per frenzy from your amulet. That's another 30% movement speed. You get movement speed tattoos. So I have like 7 of these or something, so that's 14% movement speed. You get movement speed on your boots, obviously, onslaught on kill, onslaught movement speed during, and then one of the bigger movement speed multipliers that I haven't mentioned, or that I actually really like, is elusive on crit with a charge stacker. Feels really good because this amulet comes with 10% elusive effect per power charge. And there is a new tattoo which gives elusive starts gaining effect when you proc it rather than losing effect for the first 2 seconds. So let me just try to showcase how much movement speed this gives when you proc your elusive. So we'll go over here. We'll go over to my miscellaneous. You'll see my movement speed. It says 56 because I have no frenzy charges or whatever. We'll get some frenzy charges built up right here. We'll proc elusive. You'll see it goes 300%. We're up 200% movement speed. So it goes up first, and then it goes down. So you have a bunch of movement speed that procs from your frenzy charges, and then whenever you're procking this elusive, that gives you a bunch of movement speed. And obviously, we have good attack speed, so you can leap slam, do that quickly and whatnot. And we end up feeling like a fairly feels-good movement character, even though we're not wearing, you know, the quality of life belt, the Mage Blood, or an acceleration shrine. That's where we're getting our speed from, is that really high efficient elusive, plus our frenzy charges makes that feel pretty dang good. Okay, I think I've covered the vast majority of the stuff going on for the scaling. Just a few more tidbits is we're getting crit immune via, I have 10 crit reduction tattoos plus crit reduction on my chest, so that's pretty nice. We are getting the cooldown consume 20% to not consume on use, which is nice for the Void Shockwave. Void Shockwave also repeats on up to 6 enemies when you get it up to level 6 rather than 5 at level 4, What's one of the other nice things about the +2 support is it also scales up the effectiveness of the Void Shockwave. It's 476 at level 6, 462 at level 4. We're also scaling some CDR with Bound, and we have 2 Shaper mod items for that Bound, and we have CDR on our boots, which means our Void Shockwave, if you hover over to it and go to miscellaneous, says 40 CDR. And eventually, I would like to make a ring with +3 Shockwave cooldowns. This will end up losing us a charge, but if we make a manifold ring, which I'm going to try to make, is going to be a +3 cooldown, cold per frenzy, and like life on it, like something like that. Go for a reflected manifold. That would be pretty cool for the Void Shockwave, storing up to 4 cooldowns. Because the main downside you get when you click Void Shockwave is you lose the stored cooldowns you have with regular Shockwave. Regular Shockwave has a cooldown that is twice as long, and it's way lower effectiveness, and it doesn't have the repeat on enemies. So it's much, much weaker than Void Shockwave, but at least it can store cooldowns. But we can't store cooldowns with baseline Shockwave, so that's why we're going to look at getting the plus cooldown mod from the special new essence. So yeah, that's some of the stuff going on with the ring. I still have some, like, I want to make some cooler items for the build. I am really enjoying this character a ton. For me, this is probably my build of the league. It's just so dang satisfying to, like, hit an enemy and have them blow up with Herald of Ice, and then have that chain proliferate, and just the whole pack in front of you just blows up. And so I'm having a lot of fun with it. Probably going to invest more into it. I might try to make, we'll see if Bird Prison is a pain, but I might try to go to Bird Prison to try to make a proper 3 implicit ring for the build is what we'll be thinking about potentially. But yeah, anyways, that is the Void Shockwave Christmas Tree Spinning Slayer. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this rundown of the character. The POB is obviously going to be in the description. And yeah, I might make one more video on this character because I want to min-max it a little bit more. And I hope you guys are having fun with the league. And until next time, I'll catch you guys all later. Take care and peace out. Have a good one.